Hello, Starseeds, and welcome to this episode of Astrology Chat, where we're going to talk all about Pluto and a case study on none other than Roddy Piper and the movie They Live.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Okay, so before I get into the whole presentation, this is going to be the last astrology chat that's going to be titled Astrology Chats. This is going to now be rebranded as Psychedelic Neurolinguistic Astrology Conversations, or a salon of some sort, I suppose. Just because that is my own personal lens in terms of viewing the cosmos, and that's going to be infused into every little chat that we're going to do like this. So I didn't change the presentation, so it still has astrology chats, and though that technically is still the case, I just have this extra flavor of the NLP, or the neuro-linguistic programming aspect of it, as well as the whole psychedelic aspect of it as well. And so without further ado, let's get right into the presentation all about Pluto. Hello, Starseeds, and welcome to this presentation of Astrology Chats, where we're going to talk all about Pluto, featuring Roddy Piper and the movie They Live. I'm going to get into a little bit of intel about each of these topics, so not to worry if you're not familiar with any of the things that I'm talking about right now. You're going to fully get into it. We're going to first start with the importance of Pluto. I have mentioned in previous podcasts that we are going to have Pluto entering Aquarius very soon, but what does that mean for all those not so astrology literate folk yet? We're going to get into that, as well as a case study on Roddy Piper, the wrestler, who passed away in 2015 and who is also the star of the John Carpenter movie They Live. So we're going to get into that, unpacking all of that. Let's dive right into it. Okay, so you can see here we have a brief agenda, just so we can guide the conversation as it comes to the topics discussed today. So the star intel that we're going to be discussing today include Pluto. We're going to get into the significance of Pluto and why it's a generational planet, and why both myself and Kevin hate the theorists that came up with the terms such as Gen Z and millennials. They're a little bit, from an NLP perspective, pretty terrible as it comes to actually speaking to the flavor or the vibe of what they are supposed to describe as per generations. I think Pluto and its transits do a much better job of describing collective soul purpose as far as generational analysis is concerned. So we're going to get into that. And then we're going to get into Roddy Piper and his chart. Then we're going to get into They Live, the movie, and we're going to get into that movie's chart. And finally, we're going to bring it all together with my interpretation from a psychedelic neurolinguistic astrology perspective. Okay, so Pluto, the generational planet. Pluto speaks to the energies of a particular group of people born under the sign that Pluto was in or transiting through. Pluto transits can take anywhere from 10 to 30 years to transit each sign. Now, I'm going to get into the latest 3 generations of Pluto. Please do not feel left out if you are a Pluto in Cancer or a Pluto in Virgo generation. I didn't get to you in this presentation. I will focus on that in an upcoming planet presentation about Pluto. And I'm going to add in some Sailor Moon intel here as it comes to Sailor Pluto. She's actually one of my favorite Sailor Scouts after Sailor Moon and Sailor Mars. Sailor Pluto is actually supposed to be 800 years old, and she's given the responsibility from Neo Queen Serenity to guard the space-time door. And she has these keys of space-time, which can be used to transit space-time or travel through time into different dimensions via use of these keys. And when it comes to Pluto, there's a lot of transformational qualities as it comes to Pluto, and that's why the energies of Pluto can be very significant as it comes to the sign that it's in. Okay, so let's get into Pluto in the signs. Depending on the sign that Pluto is in or transiting through, that's going to dictate the flavor of what that transit will hold. And the best way to kind of do that is through a case study or illustrating that in real time. Okay, so this is a generational analysis of Pluto in the signs, starting with Pluto in Scorpio. Pluto in Scorpio is a generation that takes place from 1984, late 1984, so about November, until about 1995. I've mentioned previously before that I am a Pluto in Scorpio baby, and fun fact, Pluto was not in Scorpio for very long. So as I said, the transits can take anywhere from 10 to 30 years. Pluto was only in Scorpio for about 10 years, so on the shorter end. And Pluto is concerned with the occult, sex, and death, which is also what Scorpio is kind of concerned with as well. So Scorpio is concerned with the 8th house, and this concerns darkness, the occult, what's unseen. Scorpios are known as the detectives of the zodiac, so there is an unearthing, an awareness of things that are felt and not necessarily seen. Folks in this generation are willing to uncover very deep truths and are concerned with taboo subjects. They also are not afraid of controversy and can see it as a positive conduit to change. So after 1995, Pluto moved into Sagittarius, and this generation takes place from approximately 1995 till about 2008. And Sagittarius era at this time marked a time of extreme expansion. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, which is concerned with expansion and outward-looking, very idealistic thinking. It can be concerned with things like religion and higher ideals. And if we think about this time, the internet started to really take a hold within our culture and our society. And so Pluto and Sagittarius babies were definitely influenced by this ability to just grab information and intel from the internet for whatever is out there. And so there can be this level of already knowing things before experiencing them. However, there is intel through actual experience, which I think this generation needs to learn in their lifetime. After all, Sagittarius energy is mutable, and it does revolve around travel, growth, and moving forward. It's just about harnessing the direction, ensuring that those arrows are aimed in a way that is beneficial to humankind and our human family, as opposed to being co-opted by maybe negative forces, which I think is a danger of this generation. And then finally, we have, not really finally, but we're still in this right now, Pluto in Capricorn. This is between the years of 2008, so Pluto moved out of Sagittarius and into Capricorn, and it's going to be there until 2024. Now, we have something really special coming up. Pluto is going to be moving into Aquarius in March, about end of March, for about a month. So Pluto does go retrograde, moves around and so it's in a very interesting spot right now where it's going to move into Aquarius for a little bit and then back into Capricorn, and then we'll stay in Aquarius in 2024. And Capricorn, the influence of this time is that Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn, Kronos, represents restriction and work, the master's master, the teacher, cancel culture, and reckoning, punishment for deeds that maybe shouldn't have ever been done. If you were supposed to be someone who's a leader and someone who's supposed to be exemplifying behavior, there is a reckoning and punishment for that, and that is something that continues to impact us, as well as this is going to influence the children, this generation growing up in this time of restriction, and influence their characteristics of that generation of how we do work. So another thing that kind of happened at this time, like Pluto is about transforming things, and Pluto did transform the way that we worked over this last period. After all, a lot of people working from home, working virtually, different ways of doing things like education all happened in this generation, and as such, we are influenced by it. So that's just a little way of showing a little case study of how Pluto influences the generation based on the sign that it's in. And so if you were born in any of these buckets, I think that it's a much more accurate way of describing a generation versus Gen Z or whatever. So that's what I think. I'm eager to know your thoughts as well. So now that we have gotten some background on Pluto and the importance of Pluto and some background, we're now going to go into a case study of Roddy Piper, who I've pictured above me, and the movie They Live, which Roddy was a main star of, the John Carpenter movie, which is actually supposed to be, I think, part of a dystopian type of trilogy. All right, so as you can see, pictured to the right of me is Roddy Piper's birth chart. And Roddy was born in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada, so in the prairies, on April 17th, 1954. So Roddy is born an Aries, and this totally makes sense. He was a wrestler. Actually, let me give some background information about Roddy Piper, and this kind of relates back to my stories about being a prairie girl as well, because wrestling itself was very popular in the prairies, and Roddy Piper was I think the way that his story goes, this is very Cliff Notes version, so bear that in mind, but I believe that his father had left his family when he was quite young, and he was homeless for a bit, but he started professionally wrestling at the age of 15, which very young. So he grew up really using his physicality and his body, very much the Aries warrior archetype right here. But as you can also see, he's very close to Pisces. So there is an element there of understanding the imagination and the dream world, right? And you could kind of see that Roddy Piper was known for his entrance with the bagpipes. There's a really fun story about how he learned how to play the bagpipes somehow, but he could never recall how he knew. It was like he always knew how to play the bagpipes. So that kind of thing is expressed with that cusp, I think, between Aries into coming into the real, the now, and the physicality of things, and then the unseen side of stuff. But we're here to talk about Pluto mainly, and Roddy actually is from a generation I did not speak of, so let's find Pluto right here. So he's Pluto in Leo generation, and if we think about the sign of Leo, he's closer to Virgo here as well, which deals with also like maternal service concerns. Where Pluto sits in terms of Leo is reinforcing a lot of that warrior archetype. You can see that this is aspecting here Pluto and his sun sign Aries. Sorry, I was like pointing at Mercury. Mercury is also in Aries as well. So his way of expressing himself through physicality, and that one is the one more aspected with Pisces. So what I was saying in terms of an interpretation still stands in an expression of self that bridges the gap between the immaterial world and the physical realm. And being a warrior, right? That's reinforced here with the sun actually being closer to Taurus and the body, which is what Taurus is also very much associated with. Something else also sitting in Taurus here is Venus. So Roddy's Venus sits in Taurus. So earthly pleasures and love and very tactile things. It's also a connection to the earth herself. I was getting sidetracked. We're here to talk about Pluto here. I was saying that Pluto is aspecting with Mercury here then. There is another aspect here. I believe that this is a sextile. Do not quote me on this, astrologers. Sorry here. And I think that it's Jodorowsky who said that it's better to be aspected than not aspected at all. So not to be afraid of things like squares or harder or challenging aspects, but instead embrace the additional storylines that they will offer to you, right? So the opposition between Pluto always brings that element of transformation and intense change to things, and having the push and pull of Pluto aspecting with Mercury. We're going to get into They Live itself, but it was said that John Carpenter picked Roddy, the role of Nada in They Live, who's kind of like a nobody homeless guy who ends up finding these glasses that enable him to see the aliens, right? See the truth. Put the glasses on. So the idea of expressing communication in a way that's going to be transformative is here. You can see that. And in terms of shaking things up, that's really what Pluto's all about, like destabilizing that to bring in the new. That's definitely seen here. Other things of note to look at with Roddy's chart before we go into the movie They Live and the chart of that movie and its release is that Roddy's moon is in Libra, and Libra opposes Aries, and so his moon and sun are opposing each other. And if we look at the sun being your main personality, this like tough macho guy who's expressing himself in wrestling and to the world, and the moon sign being your inner world, your emotional side, your inner child, that's sitting in a Venusian sign such as Libra and very close to Neptune. And Neptune is known as the king of the unseen kingdom, the imagination, magic, the sea, the water, what's underneath the surface of water. It's very much that there's more to Roddy than what it seems. Like you see this like Scottish bagpipe guy, this really tough dude, but it really inside there's deep levels of gnosis and knowing, And I saw an interview that Kevin had played for me of Roddy on Alex Jones, and he kept on saying like, well, I'm not educated or anything. I don't know this kind of stuff. But he does know. And just because he didn't go to school or anything for it, let's take a look here. Like Capricorn, there's like this, the North Node in Capricorn, this idea that like work is kind of like what he's here to do. But in his work, in doing They Live, he got much more of an education than real education ever would have given him. There you go. That's the interpretation of that. And so with that, let's get into the movie They Live. So the release date, I went by the release date in terms of the astrology of this movie. And this movie was released on November 4th of 1988. So it's an 80s movie. This movie is a Pluto in Scorpio movie. And it's interesting because, as I mentioned about Pluto and Scorpio as a generation, the idea of the occult and the unseen and all of that kind of stuff being brought to the surface and having really uncomfortable conversations. They Live is all about that. And so I'm going to get into the synopsis of They Live for everyone who doesn't know. I recommend that you watch this movie. If you have not watched it, it is a classic. It starts out with Nada, which is played by Roddy, and he's homeless. He doesn't really have a backstory. John Carpenter told Roddy to create a backstory, but not to tell anyone about it, but just to act it out. All that you kind of know is that Roddy's Nada's fallen on some hard times, and he comes across these glasses, and when he puts the glasses on, he can see the world for as it truly is. And the way that John Carpenter shows this is in black and white, and he sees that some humans or people are not even human, or some people are not even human, and they're actually these like weird Borg-like aliens. In addition to that, you also see the fact that the propaganda and all the ads say things like obey and money is your master and things like that. So seeing things as they truly are. And so that movie, the themes of that movie are very much expressive of the generation that it was released in. So if we see here, let's find Pluto again, right there in Scorpio, conjunct the sun, right there with the sun. So the sun is also in Scorpio at the time of this movie's release. And Libra is right there really close. Mercury is right there quite close as well, but it is sitting in Libra. But all of that together just speaks to the fact that the movie is meant to act as a conduit, a way for a truth to be revealed, perhaps an uncomfortable, controversial truth, but a truth to be communicated outward and to ultimately shake up things. And if we look at the North Node here as well, if we talk about the North Node being purpose and mission of a Starseed blueprint, a mission of this movie is to speak to things that aren't seen, because Pisces deals with the 12th house stuff. Here, I'm not going to pay too much attention to the housing system because I don't think the release date necessarily had a time of birth necessarily. But if we speak to the fact that the North Node is in Pisces, it means that the purpose of this movie is to speak to a truth that cannot be so tangibly spoken about, but what all good art does, speaks to the ineffable, and a way of generating a feeling, a gnosis in those who watch the movie. And the movie, I think, does end with, I can't even remember how it ends. I need to rewatch it. Maybe we should have a watch party for They Live. But there is a resistance, and then they manufacture all of these sunglasses, and there's a huge fight scene in the movie, the longest fight scene where he's trying to make his friend like put the glasses on. And I feel like a lot of us who are very much lucid and awake feel like we could use those glasses to just like share with our friends. Like, can you just put the glasses on and you can just see things the way I see them? Okay, so that is the chart for the movie They Live. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining me on this latest, specifically astrology chat. We are going to do more in the future under the title of Psychedelic Neurolinguistic Astrology Conversations. And the next one that I'm going to be doing, I'm in the midst of working on it right now, is on the real life Bonnie and Clyde and a synastry and composite reading of these two OG ride or die lovers, right? In the spirit of Valentine's Day, of course. And of course, for more magic, you can always check us out at sacredsomaalchemy.com, as well as on locals at the Warrior Class. And if you want to support my work on Patreon, you can check that out in all of the links that I will provide in the description below. I also do have a sponsor for my videos, Blue Goba, especially my Psychedelic Neurolinguistic Astrology, because in terms of divinating and my magical tools, you can get 15% off if you use my code RZ15, and I will include a link to that down below. And finally, we also do have our Sacred Soma sponsor. You can use the same code RZ15 for all products on Sacred Soma's store. So I look forward to seeing all of you in the next Psychedelic Neurolinguistic Astrology conversation, and I hope that you learned a little something about Pluto. What generation of Pluto are you from? Are you Pluto in Sagittarius? Are you Pluto in Virgo? Are you perhaps something else entirely? Are you still confused? I look forward to hearing any of your comments. But until then, I hope you have a beautiful day, beautiful evening, wherever you may be in the world. Signing off. Bye.